The warning lights flashed red across the bridge of the massive Zephyrian command ship. Admiral Vextar's 4 eyes narrowed as he stared at the tactical display. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Report," he barked, his voice echoing through the vast bridge where dozens of officers worked at their stations. Lieutenant Krickstahl looked up from his sensor console, confusion clear on his scaled face. "Sir, I'm detecting an energy signature unlike anything in our databases. It's massive and growing stronger." "Show me," Vextar commanded. The main display flickered and showed empty space near the center of their fleet formation. 3 Imperial dreadnoughts floated in perfect formation, each one the size of a small city. Around them, dozens of cruisers and destroyers maintained their positions. The Kepler nexus was supposed to be impenetrable. No enemy had ever broken through their defenses. "The energy reading is off the scale," another officer called out. "Whatever's coming, it's big." Vexitar felt a chill run down his spine. The humans were supposed to be primitive. Their colony ships were slow and their weapons weak. That's what all the reports said. That's why this final attack was supposed to be easy. "All ships, raise shields to maximum," he ordered. "Prepare weapons." The space in front of them began to shimmer like water. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist. Then, without any warning, a ship appeared. It didn't come through a jump gate like normal ships. It didn't follow any hyperspace lane. It just appeared, as if it had always been there. The human warship was unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever seen. It was sleek and dark, with smooth curves that seemed to absorb light. Strange energy patterns danced across its hull. It was smaller than their dreadnoughts, but somehow looked far more dangerous. "Impossible," Vextar whispered. "How did it get past our sensors?" On board the human ship, Admiral Kane Murphy stood calmly on his bridge. His gray hair was neat and his uniform crisp. Behind him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. "Jump complete, sir," reported Lieutenant Lisa Parker from her navigation station. "We're exactly where we planned to be." "Excellent work, Lisa," Murphy said. He looked around at his officers. "Jake, what's our tactical situation?" Commander Jake Williams checked his displays. 3 dreadnoughts, Admiral. 47 smaller ships. They've raised shields and are powering weapons." "Expected," Murphy nodded. "They're scared. Can't blame them." Captain Alex Turner, leader of the Marine detachment, stepped forward. "Sir, they could open fire at any moment." Murphy smiled slightly. "Let them try." "Lisa, are you reading their communications?" "Yes, sir," Parker replied. "They're panicking. Lots of chatter about how we got past their defenses." The Zephyrian fleet was indeed in chaos. Officers shouted orders while others demanded explanations that no one could give. How had a single human ship appeared in the middle of their most secure formation? "Admiral," came a nervous voice from the communication station. "The human ship is hailing us." Vextar's claws clicked against his command chair. In all his years of conquest, no enemy had ever demanded to speak with him. They usually begged for mercy or fought to the death. "Put them through," he growled. The main screen changed to show Admiral Murphy standing on his bridge. The human looked calm and confident, not at all like someone facing impossible odds. "Admiral Vextar, I presume," Murphy said in perfect Zephyrian. "I am Admiral Kane Murphy of the United Earth Defense Force." "How did you get here?" Vextar demanded. "Our sensors showed nothing. Our shields should have stopped any ship from materializing inside our formation." Murphy's expression didn't change. "We have our ways, but that's not why I'm here." "You're here to surrender," Vextar stated. "One ship against my entire fleet. Even humans aren't that foolish." "Actually," Murphy said, "we need to talk." The simple word sent a shock through the Zephyrian bridge. An enemy commander outnumbered 50 to 1 wanted to talk. "You have nothing to say that interests me," Vexitar snarled. "Prepare to be destroyed." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Murphy replied calmly. "You see, you're not fighting what you think you're fighting." On the Liberty's bridge, Jake Williams watched the enemy ships carefully. "Admiral, they're charging weapons," Let them, Murphy said. They'll learn soon enough. Vextar raised his hand, ready to give the order to fire. But something in the human's calm confidence made him pause. No ship commander should be this relaxed when facing certain death. What do you mean? Vextar asked, his hand still raised. Murphy stepped closer to his communication screen. You think you've been fighting humans for the past 3 years. You think you've been winning against Earth's colonial forces. We have been winning, Vextar protested. We've destroyed dozens of your colony ships. Your settlements burn across 5 star systems. Those weren't our main forces, Murphy said quietly. Those were just our outer colonies, volunteers who knew the risks. The Zephyrian admiral felt cold fear creeping up his spine. What are you saying? I'm saying you've never fought Earth itself. You've never even seen our real ships. Murphy's voice was steady but carried an edge of steel. Until now. Around the bridge, Zephyrian officers looked at each other with growing worry. Their sensors still couldn't explain how the human ship had appeared. Their computers couldn't identify its weapon systems or defensive capabilities. Impossible, Vextar whispered. Our intelligence reports clearly stated that humans were technologically inferior. Your intelligence was wrong, Murphy replied. We've been watching your empire for decades. We know about your conquest of the Alterran system. We know about the slave camps on Proxima 7th. We know about the genocide on Kepler 442b. Each revelation hit like a physical blow. Those were classified Imperial operations. No outsider should know about them. We've been gathering evidence, Murphy continued. We've been preparing. And now, we're here. Vextar's hand shook as he maintained his position above the fire control. You're bluffing. One ship cannot threaten my entire fleet. Murphy smiled, and for the first time it wasn't friendly. Admiral, you're about to learn why that assumption is wrong. Stand down your weapons, withdraw from human space, and we can discuss terms peacefully. And if I refuse? Then you'll discover just how much you underestimated humanity. The communication ended, leaving the Zephyrian bridge in stunned silence. In all their years of conquest, they had never encountered an enemy like this, an enemy that appeared from nowhere, knew their deepest secrets and showed no fear despite impossible odds. Vextar stared at the human ship on his display. It hung in space like a dark promise, waiting for his decision. Around him, his officers waited for orders that he suddenly wasn't sure how to give. The humans had just changed everything. 2 hours later, Admiral Vextar paced nervously in his ship's conference room. The massive chamber had been built to intimidate visiting diplomats from conquered worlds. Golden walls rose to a domed ceiling, and holographic displays showed the might of the Zephyrian Empire across the galaxy. Today, none of that seemed to matter. The human delegation had agreed to come aboard, but only after Admiral Murphy made one thing clear. If anything happened to his people, the Liberty would respond immediately. Vextar had no doubt the human meant every word. The door slid open with a soft hiss. 3 humans walked in, escorted by nervous Zephyrian guards. The lead human was a woman with short brown hair and intelligent eyes. She wore a simple blue uniform with no weapons visible. I am Dr. Emma Brooks, she said in perfect Zephyrian. This is Colonel Sam Mitchell, my military advisor. Colonel Mitchell was a tall man with graying temples and the bearing of a career soldier. He nodded politely, but his eyes constantly scanned the room for threats. Behind them walked a third human, younger than the others, carrying what looked like a briefcase. Admiral Vextar, Dr. Brooks continued. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Vextar settled into his command chair, trying to project authority he no longer felt certain of. Beside him sat Counselor Thixara, his diplomatic advisor. Her 6 arms moved nervously as she arranged her data tablets. Let's be clear about something, Vextar said. You are here because I allow it. One word from me and my fleet opens fire on your ship. Dr. Brooks smiled calmly. Admiral, may I show you something? Without waiting for permission, she nodded to the young human with the briefcase. He opened it and pulled out a small device that projected a hologram into the center of the room. Thus, a image showed a Zephyrian battle fleet attacking a defenseless planet. Cities burned below as orbital bombardment turned the surface into a wasteland. Vextar recognized it immediately. Kepler 442b, Dr. Brooks said quietly. You ordered the death of 6 million Alterans 3 years ago. They had already surrendered. How do you have this? Counselor Thixara gasped. These recordings were classified at the highest levels. We have many things, Colonel Mitchell said, speaking for the first time. His voice was hard as steel. We've been watching your empire for a very long time. The hologram changed. Now it showed the interior of a Zephyrian slave camp. Thousands of beings from dozens of different species worked in terrible conditions, while guards with energy whips drove them harder. Proxima 7, Dr. Brooks continued. Current population, 200,000 slaves from 16 different worlds. They mine rare minerals for your war machine while their families are held hostage. Vextar's 4 eyes widened. This is impossible. No outsider has ever penetrated our security. Your security assumes that enemies will use technology similar to your own, Colonel Mitchell replied. That was your first mistake. The hologram changed again. This time it showed detailed technical specifications of Zephyrian ships, including weaknesses that even Vextar didn't know about. We know the frequency of your shield generators, Dr. Brooks said matter-of-factly. We know the power output of your weapons. We know your communication codes and your supply routes. We know everything, the young human added, speaking up. For the first time. Counselor Thixara leaned forward, her voice shaking. What do you want? Dr. Brooks touched the projector again. The hologram now showed star maps with dozens of systems marked in red. Complete withdrawal from all human-controlled space within 30 days, she said. Full reparations to every world your empire has attacked in the past decade, and immediate release of all slaves in your prison camps. Vextar laughed, but the sound was forced and hollow. Ridiculous, you have 1 ship, I have hundreds. Do we? Colonel Mitchell asked. The hologram changed once more. Now it showed space around the Kepler nexus, but from a perspective that should have been impossible. The view was from outside the system looking in, and there, barely visible against the darkness, were shapes that hadn't been there before. Ships, Vextar whispered. 6 more vessels arrived 20 minutes ago. Dr. Brooks confirmed. Your sensors still can't detect them, can they? The Zephyrian admiral's claws dug into his armrests. Even 7 ships cannot defeat my entire fleet. Admiral, Dr. Brooks said gently, you still don't understand what you're dealing with. She activated the projector again. This time it showed technical readouts that made no sense to Zephyrian science, energy outputs that exceeded anything in their databases, weapon systems based on principles they had never heard of. Your most powerful dreadnought has a maximum power output of 47 terawatts, Colonel Mitchell said. The Liberty operates at 600 terawatts in standard mode. Impossible, Counselor Thixara breathed. Your shields work by deflecting energy attacks, Dr. Brooks continued. Our weapons don't use energy. They manipulate matter at the quantum level. The young human stepped forward. Your fastest ships can travel at 8 times light speed. We don't travel through space at all, we fold it. Each revelation hit like a hammer blow. Everything the Zephyrian Empire thought they knew about warfare, about technology, about their place in the galaxy, was suddenly wrong. This is a trick, Vextar said desperately. Some kind of elaborate hoax. Dr. Brooks looked at him with something that might have been pity. Admiral, 3 years ago you began attacking human colonies. You thought you were conquering a primitive species. You never wondered why Earth itself never responded? Your homeworld is too far away, Vextar protested. By the time word reached Earth, we would have conquered everything. Earth knew about your first attack 6 minutes after it happened, Colonel Mitchell said. We've been in constant communication with every human settlement you've attacked. Then why didn't you stop us? Counselor Thixara asked. Dr. Brooks was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was sad. Because we needed to know what kind of species we were dealing with. We needed to document your war crimes. We needed evidence. Evidence for what? For the tribunal that will judge your empire, she replied. The same tribunal that will decide whether your species deserves a second chance or should be removed from the galaxy entirely. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Vexitar felt the weight of his empire's crimes pressing down on him. Every conquered world, every destroyed city, every life taken in the name of Zephyrian superiority. What tribunal? He whispered. The Galactic Liberation Council, Dr. Brooks said. Formed by every species your empire has oppressed. They've been waiting for someone with the power to stop you. And that someone is humanity, Colonel Mitchell added. Vexitar stared at the holographic evidence floating before him. Centuries of imperial might suddenly seemed like nothing compared to the quiet confidence of these three humans. What happens now? He asked. Dr. Brooks stood up. Now you have a choice, Admiral. Accept our terms and begin the process of making amends for your empire's crimes, or face the consequences of continued aggression. And if I choose to fight? Her expression hardened. Then you'll discover why Admiral Murphy was so confident when he arrived. You'll learn what happens when humanity stops watching and starts acting. The meeting ended in silence. As the humans left, Vexitar stared at the empty space where their holograms had been. Everything had changed, and he knew there was no going back. Admiral Vexitar sat in his command chair, staring at the human warship on his main display. 6 hours had passed since the diplomatic meeting ended. 6 hours of heated arguments with his officers, desperate communications with the imperial capital, and growing fear in his chest. The Emperor's final message had been clear. Destroy the humans or face execution for cowardice. Admiral, his communications officer called out. The human ship is broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through, Vexitar ordered. Admiral Murphy's calm face appeared on the screen. Behind him, his bridge crew worked with the same quiet efficiency as before. Admiral Vexitar, Murphy said. I trust you've had time to consider our offer. The Emperor has given his answer, Vexitar replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. We will not surrender to a handful of primitive ships. Murphy nodded sadly. I hoped it wouldn't come to this, but if you insist on a demonstration, we'll provide one. The communication ended. Immediately, alarms began blaring across the Zephyrian flagship. Energy spike from the human vessel, Lieutenant Crickstall reported. It's unlike anything we've seen before. On the Liberty's bridge, Chief Engineer Ryan Davis monitored his displays carefully. The ship's quantum engines hummed with barely contained power. Gravitational field generators online, he reported to Admiral Murphy. Ready for demonstration sequence 1. Proceed, Ryan, Murphy said calmly. Lieutenant Lisa Parker turned from her navigation station. Admiral, I've located a suitable target. Asteroid designation KN7742, approximately 2 kilometers in diameter. Perfect, Murphy nodded. Casey, you're up. Weapons Officer Casey Johnson's fingers danced across her control panel. Gravity manipulation system active, sir. Locking onto target asteroid. Across space, something impossible began to happen. The massive asteroid, floating peacefully in the void, suddenly began to move. Not pushed by rockets or pulled by cables, but lifted and guided by invisible forces that bent space itself. On the Zephyrian command ship, chaos erupted. The asteroid is moving, an officer shouted. But there's nothing touching it. Gravity. Readings are off the scale, another added. It's like space itself is warped around that rock. Admiral Vexitar watched in growing horror as the 2-kilometer asteroid danced through space like a toy in the hands of a child. The human ship was controlling gravity itself, making the fundamental forces of the universe obey their will. Impossible, he whispered. No species has ever mastered gravitational manipulation. The asteroid moved in perfect patterns around the human ship. Loops, spirals, figure eights. Each movement demonstrated control so precise it defied everything the Zephyrians knew about physics. Communications Officer Beth Taylor opened a channel to the Zephyrian fleet. Admiral Vexitar, this concludes our first demonstration. Are you ready to reconsider? Never, Vextar snarled, though his voice shook. One trick does not make you invincible. Very well, came Murphy's reply. Demonstration 2. On the Liberty's bridge, Admiral Murphy turned to his crew. All civilian vessels have withdrawn to safe distance. Confirmed, sir, Parker reported. The nearest non-military ship is 50,000 kilometers away. Murphy nodded grimly. Then, let's show them what our defenses can do. Casey, prepare to receive enemy fire. Johnson's eyes widened. Sir, you want them to shoot at us? Sometimes the best way to make a point is to let someone try their best and fail completely. The message went out to the Zephyrian fleet. Admiral Vextar, you may fire at will. Use your most powerful weapons. Vextar couldn't believe what he was hearing. They want us to attack them? It's obviously a trap, Counselor Thixara said nervously. Or they're insane, Vextar replied. But deep down, he suspected neither was true. The humans knew something his people didn't. All ships, he commanded. Target the human vessel. Full power. 47 Zephyrian warships turned their weapons toward the Liberty. Energy cannons charged with enough power to crack a moon. Plasma. Torpedoes armed with warheads that could vaporize cities. Fire, Vextar ordered. Space erupted in brilliant light as the combined firepower of the Imperial fleet struck the human ship. Energy beams that could melt through the strongest armor hit the Liberty from every direction. Explosions that should have torn the vessel apart bloomed around its hull. When the light faded, the human ship hung in space exactly as before. Not a scratch on its dark hull. Not even a flicker in whatever protected it. On the Liberty's bridge, the crew barely felt the impact. Shields holding at 98%, reported Chief Engineer Davis. Minimal power drain. Their weapons tickle, Casey Johnson said with a grin. Murphy opened communications again. Thank you for that demonstration, Admiral. Now let us show you what real weapons can do. The human ship turned toward an abandoned space station at the edge of the system. The old Zephyrian outpost had been built centuries ago and left to drift when better locations were found. Target acquired, Johnson reported. Quantum dissolution beam ready. Fire, Murphy ordered quietly. What happened next would haunt Zephyrian nightmares for generations. A beam of invisible energy reached out from the Liberty and touched the space station. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the station began to disappear. Not exploding, not melting, disappearing. The massive structure, over a kilometer long, simply ceased to exist. Piece by piece, layer by layer, it faded from reality as if it had never been built. Molecular bonds severed at the quantum level, Johnson explained to the stunned bridge crew. The station is being reduced to its component atoms. Within minutes, where a huge space station had once floated, there was only empty space and a cloud of harmless particles. The Zephyrian fleet fell silent. Every ship, every crew member, every officer stared at the spot where the station had been. Their most powerful weapons couldn't even scratch the human ship's shields, but the humans had erased a space station from existence like wiping words from a page. Admiral Vextar's hands shook as he gripped his command chair. What kind of monsters are we fighting? Not monsters, came Murphy's voice over the communication channel. Just a species that learned long ago that the universe has rules, and we learned how to rewrite them. Multiple alarms began sounding across the Zephyrian flagship. Reports flooded in from throughout the fleet. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, voice barely steady. Captains Thyrix and Velak are requesting permission to withdraw their ships. Cowards, Vextar snarled. Admiral, another officer interrupted. Captain Zorith says his crew is refusing orders. They're demanding immediate surrender. More reports came in, ship after ship reporting crew unrest, officers questioning orders, entire departments shutting down in terror. This is mutiny, Vextar growled. This is reality, came Murphy's calm voice. Your people aren't cowards, Admiral. They're smart enough to recognize when they're completely outmatched. Communications Officer Taylor's voice carried across the fleet channels. This concludes our demonstration. Admiral Vextar, your fleet is no match for human technology. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your defenses cannot stop us. This is your final opportunity to surrender with honor. Vextar looked around his bridge at officers who no longer met his eyes. His mighty fleet, the pride of the Zephyrian Empire, had been revealed as nothing more than children's toys compared to human power. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Vextar truly understood what helplessness felt like. And somewhere in the back of his mind a terrible thought began to form. If this was what humanity could do with just one ship, what would happen when the rest of their fleet arrived? The golden throne room of Emperor Zixthul had seen many victories celebrated and many enemies brought low. Today, it witnessed something that had never happened before in the 1,000-year history of the Zephyrian Empire. Absolute defeat. The Emperor's massive form filled the command throne, his 6 arms gesturing wildly as he watched the recordings from the Kepler Nexus. His scales had turned from gold to a sickly gray color, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "This cannot be real," he declared, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "No species possesses such technology." General Korth, his military advisor, stood nervously nearby. "Your Majesty, I've verified the recordings 3 times. Our best scientists confirm these demonstrations are genuine." "Then our scientists are fools," the Emperor snapped. "Gravitational manipulation is impossible. Quantum weapons are theoretical nonsense." "Your Majesty," came a quiet voice from the communication console. "Admiral Vextar is requesting immediate instructions." The Emperor's eyes blazed with fury. "Tell him to destroy those human ships or die trying." Meanwhile, in the Kepler Nexus, the situation was rapidly spinning out of control. On the bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Conquest, Captain Thyrix faced a crisis unlike any in his long career. "Sir," his first officer reported, "the crew is refusing to man battle stations. They say fighting the humans is suicide." Thyrix understood their fear. He had watched the recordings of the human demonstrations. He had seen his own weapons fail completely against their shields. But orders were orders. "Tell them the Emperor's command is absolute," he said, though his own voice lacked conviction. "Sir," another officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it through," Thyrix ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a human warship. A woman in a crisp uniform stood at the center, her dark hair pulled back in a professional style. "I am Captain Nina Ross of the USS Defiance," she said calmly. "To all Zephyrian vessels, you have 1 hour to stand down your weapons and prepare for peaceful surrender. Any ship that continues hostile actions will be disabled." The transmission ended, leaving Thyrix staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders he wasn't sure how to give. Similar scenes played out across the Zephyrian fleet. On the cruiser Dark Thunder, Captain Valak watched his weapon systems shut down as his own officers refused to activate them. On the destroyer Swift Death, an entire department had locked themselves in their quarters rather than follow attack orders. But the most dramatic confrontation was happening on Admiral Vextar's flagship. "You will follow orders," Vextar roared at his senior staff. "I don't care how powerful these humans think they are." "Admiral," his tactical officer said carefully, "perhaps we should consider their offer. They've demonstrated clear technological superiority." "Coward," Vextar snarled. "I'll have you executed for treason." "With respect, sir," Commander Zex stepped forward. "Executing officers won't change the facts. Our weapons can't penetrate their defenses. Their weapons can destroy anything we have. Continuing this fight serves no purpose except getting our crews killed." Around the bridge, other officers nodded in agreement. The demonstrations had shaken their faith in Imperial superiority to its core. Vextar looked around at faces that no longer showed respect, only fear and resignation. His empire was crumbling before his eyes, not from external attack but from internal collapse. Space around the Kepler Nexus suddenly rippled again. More human ships appeared, materializing out of nowhere just as the Liberty had done. But these were different, larger, more threatening. Admiral Troy Baker's voice boomed across all communication channels. "This is Admiral Baker of the United Earth Defense Force. I am here with 12 ships of the line to accept the surrender of all Zephyrian forces in this system. On his flagship, the massive USS Sovereign, Baker studied tactical displays showing the scattered Zephyrian fleet. Many ships had already powered down their weapons. Others drifted aimlessly as their crews debated whether to fight or surrender. Admiral Baker, came a transmission from the Liberty. This is Admiral Murphy. The local commander is Admiral Vextar, aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion. He's been somewhat resistant to our diplomatic efforts. Baker smiled grimly. Understood, Kane. Let's see if we can change his mind. The transmission went out to every ship in the system. When Baker appeared, on their screens even the most hardened Zephyrian veterans felt their courage fail. The human admiral's weathered face spoke of decades of military experience, and his eyes held no mercy for those who threatened his people. Admiral Vextar, Baker said, you have exactly 10 minutes to surrender your fleet. Any ship that fails to comply will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. And if I refuse? Vextar asked, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Then you'll join the space station we dissolved earlier today, Baker replied matter-of-factly. The choice is yours. The next few minutes passed in tense silence. Across the fleet, individual captains began making their own decisions. The cruiser, Golden Fang, was the first to signal surrender, followed quickly by 6 destroyers. Soon nearly half the fleet had given up. Admiral, Commander Zek said quietly to Vextar, we cannot win this fight. Our duty is to our crews, not to a hopeless cause. Vextar stared at the human ships surrounding his fleet. 13 vessels against 47, yet he knew with absolute certainty that the humans held all the power. His communication console chimed with an incoming message from the Imperial capital. Emperor Zixthal's image appeared, but the transmission was broken and distorted. Admiral, the Emperor's voice crackled through static. New information has reached us. Human ships have appeared over 17 of our worlds. They're demanding immediate cessation of all military operations. The words hit like a physical blow. The humans weren't just here at Kepler Nexus. They were everywhere, striking at the heart of the Empire itself. Your Majesty, Vextar said, desperately. What are your orders? The transmission cleared for a moment, showing the Emperor's haggard face. The Council of Lords is in emergency session. 3 systems have already declared independence. The outer colonies are in revolt. The communication cut off, leaving Vextar alone with the weight of his empire's collapse. Around him, his bridge crew watched in stunned silence as their mighty civilization crumbled in real time. Reports flooded in from across Zephyrian space. Human ships appearing without warning. Entire sectors surrendering rather than face destruction. Slave worlds rising up in rebellion. Admiral, his communications officer said quietly, Captain Theryx is signaling unconditional surrender. So are Captains Valak, Morphex, and Zindar. Vextar closed his 4 eyes and made the hardest decision of his life. Signal Admiral Baker. The Zephyrian fleet surrenders. When he opened his eyes again, the galaxy had changed forever. The age of Zephyrian dominance was over. Ended not by a massive war, but by the simple arrival of 13 human ships and the terrible knowledge of what they represented. The humans had rewritten the rules of galactic power in a single day, and nothing would ever be the same again. 6 months after the surrender at Kepler Nexus, the galaxy looked very different. The massive space station called New Harmony floated serenely in neutral space, its gleaming white hull reflecting the light of 3 nearby stars. Ships from dozens of worlds docked at its ports, bringing delegates to witness history in the making. President Julia Adams walked through the station's central corridor, her simple gray suit a stark contrast to the elaborate robes worn by alien dignitaries around her. Behind her, Ambassador Dan Foster carried the documents that would reshape galactic civilization. Nervous? Foster asked quietly as they approached the main conference hall. Terrified, Adams replied with a slight smile. 6 months ago, most of these species had never heard of Earth. Now we're supposed to lead them into a new era. The massive doors slid open to reveal the largest diplomatic gathering in recorded history. Representatives from over 100 worlds filled the amphitheater, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. At the center sat the signing table, where the human Zephyrian peace accords would soon be finalized. Former High Admiral Vextar sat in a simple chair near the back of the room. Gone were his imperial decorations and symbols of rank. He wore plain clothes and carried himself with the bearing of a broken man. Beside him sat his legal counsel, preparing for the war crimes trial that would follow these proceedings. As president, Adams took her place at the central podium. The hall fell silent. 6 months ago, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. Humanity revealed itself to the galaxy under tragic circumstances. We had hoped for a peaceful first contact, but the actions of the Zephyrian Empire forced our hand. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. The story of humanity's dramatic arrival had become legend throughout the galaxy. Today we gather, not to celebrate victory over a defeated enemy, but to build something better, something that ensures the mistakes of the past are never repeated. Admiral Murphy stood near the back of the hall, no longer in his military uniform but wearing the simple blue of the new Galactic Peacekeeping Force. Beside him, Dr. Emma Brooks reviewed her notes for the presentation on humanitarian aid programs. The DOMEO, Galactic Liberation Coalition, President Adams continued, represents a new way of thinking about interstellar relations. No more empires built on conquest. No more slavery disguised as civilization. No more genocide in the name of progress. At his table, Vextar listened to every word. The past 6 months had been a journey through hell for him, facing the families of his victims, viewing evidence of atrocities he had ordered without thought, learning that the beings he had considered inferior were often more advanced than his own people. But there had been moments of hope too. Human medical teams had worked tirelessly to heal the damage done by his empire. Entire worlds that had been strip-mined were being restored using human environmental technology. Slaves were being reunited with families they thought lost forever. Commander Sarah Kim, now captain of the USS New Dawn, monitored the proceedings from her ship's bridge. Her vessel was one of 12 human ships providing security for the conference, though their presence was more symbolic than necessary. Word of human capabilities had spread throughout the galaxy, and few were foolish enough to threaten the peace process. Captain, her communications officer reported, "We're receiving the final confirmation from the Alteran delegation. They're ready to sign the accords." Kim nodded. The Alterans had lost the most under Zephyrian rule, their homeworld completely destroyed. That they were willing to participate in a peace process rather than demand revenge spoke to their incredible strength of character. President Adams gestured to a large holographic display that appeared above the assembly. It showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with different colored zones marking the new territories. The former Zephyrian Empire will be reduced to 12 core systems, she announced. The remaining territories will be returned to their original inhabitants or granted independence as they choose. Humanity will provide technological and economic support for the transition. Former Emperor Zixthul, now simply Citizen Zixthul, watched the proceedings via hologram from his prison cell on New Harmony. His trial had been swift and fair, resulting in a life sentence of community service helping to rebuild the worlds his empire had destroyed. It was a more merciful fate than many expected, but humanity insisted on justice rather than revenge. Ambassador Foster stepped forward to read the specific terms of the accords. Reparations would be paid not in credits or resources but in the form of human technology and expertise. Entire worlds would be terraformed or restored. Educational exchanges would ensure that former enemies learned to see each other as equals. The most revolutionary aspect of the accords was the establishment of the Galactic Development Initiative. Using human matter manipulation technology, dead worlds could be brought back to life in months rather than centuries. Desert planets could bloom with life. Poisoned atmospheres could be cleaned and restored. "This is not about human dominance," Dr. Brooks said as she took the podium. "This is about human responsibility. We have the power to heal the galaxy's wounds, and we intend to use it." One by one, the delegates came forward to sign the accords. Each signature represented not just a political agreement, but a species, choosing hope over fear, cooperation over conflict. When Vexitar's turn came, the hall fell completely silent. His clawed hand shook as he signed his name to the document that formally ended his empire's reign of terror. As he set down the stylus, a single tear rolled down his scaled cheek. "I cannot undo what was done," he said quietly into the microphone, "but I swear by everything I hold sacred that I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends." The ceremony concluded with President Adams making one final announcement that stunned even the most optimistic delegates. "Humanity's contribution to galactic reconstruction will begin immediately," she said. "Starting tomorrow, our fleet will begin the restoration of Kepler 442b, the Alteran homeworld. Using our most advanced terraforming technology, we estimate the planet will be habitable again within 1 year." The Alteran delegation burst into tears of joy. Their world, destroyed by Zephyrian bombardment, would live again. As the delegates filed out of the hall, Admiral Murphy caught up with President Adams. "Think it will work?" he asked. Adams looked out through the station's massive windows at the stars beyond. Ships from 100 worlds were already departing, carrying news of the Accords to every corner of the galaxy. "It has to work, Kane," she replied. "The alternative is too terrible to consider." "And if someone decides to test our resolve?" Adams smiled, but there was steel in her eyes. "Then they'll learn the same lesson the Zephyrians did. Humanity protects those who cannot protect themselves." 6 months later, the first Alteran children in a generation would take their first breaths of air on their restored homeworld. Across Iko, the galaxy, former slaves would become citizens, former enemies would become friends, and the dream of a truly peaceful civilization would begin to take shape. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and at the center of it all, humanity stood not as conquerors but as gardeners, helping the galaxy grow into something beautiful and new.